I'll start with a couple of disclaimers, and I'm sorry this map might be a little bit unreadable in such a bright light, but it shows countries where I work with, and in EIFL we mainly work with institutional open access publishing initiatives, so it will be perspective from small institutional publishing projects in the Global South and Eastern Europe. And another disclaimer is that part of my title comes from the theme for an International Open Access Week that will be celebrated in October. And we'll be talking a lot about designing equitable foundations. And I do hope that this morning we could have a conversation rather than me talking, because I'm really interested to hear what you think about that. And Plan S, a European initiative launched by the founders, have already been mentioned yesterday. And one of the principles says that where applicable, open access publication fees are covered by the funders or universities, not by individual researchers. And then I highlighted that second part. It's acknowledged that all scientists should be able to publish their work open access, even if the institutions have limited means. And I'm really happy to see this, but I'm still a little bit puzzled how exactly would you do this if a research is unfunded, if an institution doesn't have money to pay. So it's really a challenge, and I guess it's a challenge we should be addressing really quickly. And another comment comes from my colleague in Croatia, and she's really worried because it seems like now we are in a situation where, well, obviously we have different journals, and it's hard for small university journals to compete with big established journals, even if they have good editorial policies and practices. They would still be small journals published by universities. And then in addition to that, we have authors who sort of want to publish in high quality journals, but they won't be able to afford it. And her comment was that with the launch of Plan S, it seems like this gap between richer and not so rich countries is even widening. And I don't know, maybe these are ungrounded fears, but maybe they are grounded. And I'd like to make a suggestion. I don't know, maybe you're already doing that, but I haven't really seen that so often. If you publish journals that charge APCs, and if you provide waivers to authors, please make it clear to authors how many waivers you already provided. Honestly, I haven't seen such information published on the website, but maybe I haven't been looking very attentively. I think it's really important to communicate that you don't only have waivers, but that you are actually providing. And I don't think it will undermine a business model. I don't think many more people would rush to ask for waivers when they will see that a number of waivers have already been provided. So I don't know, it's a suggestion, and if you're already doing that, apologies. And to me, the question is, how can we actually bring the cost down? Because that comment from Croatia comes because costs are still very high. And I have or here, but I should probably put versus, because I guess the question is, what do we want to have? Do we want to have healthy competition versus collaboration? Or do we want to have both? Do we want to have one of them? And if you would ask me about internet service providers, I would probably say I want healthy competition, because maybe that's not my area and I'm a user. But for publishing, I don't know, for a number of years I believed in healthy competition. Now I don't think that's a way to go. and I would rather say collaborations. And I'm saying collaborations because what I see going on in Eastern Europe, in Southern Europe, are collaborative publishing initiatives. And in April, for the working group meeting that Jean-Claude chairs at the European Commission, he asked me this question, what form should open access publishing take in Eastern and Southern Europe? And that was an answer I came up with back then, and I guess I still stand with it, because what we already seen, that there are successful collaborative, community-based publishing initiatives using open infrastructures, which are publicly owned, publicly funded, publicly managed, and can't be sold. I think that's an important addition. In some cases, they are centralized, but in many cases, they are distributed and interoperable. And back then in April, I said non-APC based. Now I edit mostly non-APC based, because I'm not saying that I'm against APCs. I'm just saying that they're a little bit too high for researchers in the Global South to be able to afford them. And I decided to look around Vienna, and Croatia was the country that came to my mind. And in Croatia, they have this open access portal, Hrčak, hamster in English, which is hosted by Research and Educational Network in Croatia, and it's free and open for publishers to use it to publish and disseminate their journals, and managerial part of this project is done by libraries, and I think it's an excellent example of collaboration between research infrastructure, libraries, and journal editors and publishers. Another example of collaboration, which I really like, comes from Serbia, and we had a small project to help journals in Serbia improve their publishing practices, mainly make sure that their websites provide enough information for authors about their policies, especially copyright policies, open access policies, and it was a one-year project. Funding was really small, like 3,000 euros, and a librarian that coordinated it managed in 1 year trained 150 journal editors and publishers who really enhanced their publishing platforms, improved their policies, and it was, I think, minimum investment with an excellent return. Lars mentioned that I'm involved in European-funded projects. One of them is OpenAIR, Open Access Infrastructure for Research in Europe. And in OpenAIR, we had a sub-project reimbursing APCs for authors that received funding from the previous European Commission funded project, funded program FP7. And in addition to that, we also supported small projects that were implemented by publishers who don't charge APCs. And one of them was Open Library of Humanities, and the initiative was a hashtag EmpowerOA, which they launched, and I really like this power to librarian, power to the scholar, power to humanities, because that's where I think opportunities for collaborations come. One of those small OpenAIR supported projects was a project implemented by Polish Academy of Sciences in the area of humanities. They publish a journal on literary critics and interpretation called Texting. And they came up with arguments for flipping to open access, and they called it open business models of indirect institutional benefits. And by indirect institutional benefits, they mean opportunity for an institution to increase its visibility and image worldwide when you go open access. They collaborated with Open Edition and they use Open Edition as a publishing platform, and they also released a guide for other journals in Poland, but also other journals published by academies of sciences on legal aspects of converting a scientific journal to an open access model. And I think it's really important for other journal editors and publishers to see these kind of experiences and practices described. Another small project that OpenAIR supported was from Language Science Press Cookbook for Open Access Books and Language Science Press business model, which was made available with information how this business model has been evaluated, and I think it's important for new publishers to see this kind of experiences shared. There was also an interesting initiative, new platform for open access book distribution, which was launched by 5 open access book publishers, and I think will be available very soon. And so you can see there are already numerous examples of collaborations, but I think we can still be doing more. And infrastructures are there for social science and humanities. There is Operas project. There was a very interesting workshop in the end of August by a group of software developers, joint roadmap for open science tools, and there was a lot of interest to collaborate precisely because by working together we can bring the cost down, and if you are a software developer, I do encourage you to join this initiative. There is also Open Source Alliance for Open Scholarship, and I think Kirsten will be speaking about it later today. So infrastructures are already in place or being built, collaborative infrastructures. For funding, there is a SCOS initiative, the Global Sustainability Coalition for Open Science Services, and it is there to support open access, open science projects which need funding to ensure the long-term sustainability. So there are also platforms for helping these collaborative initiatives to develop. And Paul mentioned yesterday outreach and engagement with researchers, and I think there is a lot OSPA can do with support and training for early career researchers, or maybe also for new staff at open access publishing organizations. Being selfish, I would really like to see this kind of joint support and training initiatives for editors and publishers from the Global South. And another project I'm involved with is Foster, Open Science Training Initiative, and we just launched 10 online courses, free online courses, and we would really like to collaborate with OSPA on maybe co-designing some small courses for early career researchers or new staff at publishing presses, and I'm really optimistic. I think there is a lot going on, and we can do a lot more together. But there is one issue which is probably a little bit hard for us to address, which is research assessment and transition to open science, and it was already mentioned yesterday, and that's my final slide, because here I don't really have a good idea how we can move forward, but I'm optimistic that funders and institutional managers will start implementing, for example, this European University Association roadmap on research assessment in transition to open science. Thank you, and I would really like to hear your thoughts on designing equitable foundations for collaborative open access publishing, or if you don't believe in equitable foundations or collaborative open access publishing, I would also like to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
So I'm just interested to hear you expand a little bit on what you were saying about education and potentially what role you see OASPA playing in some of that. You know, the things you said about, I'd like to hear more about what you're doing with early career researchers, what kinds of issues you're covering there. Just like to hear more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I really like EIFL early career researchers chat, because I don't know, maybe other publishers are also doing that, but that's EIFL one is the one I follow, and it's a community with the webinars. What we could probably add to this kind of format, some kind of short online courses. So for example, with Foster, we designed an online course, and it only takes you like 1 hour to go through, with some video materials, additional reading if you want, a quiz in the end, and maybe we could think together what kind of training materials on open access publishing early career researchers would like to have, and for example come up with such a short course, or maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 courses if we decide that we need to cover a number of topics, and then have all you can ask webinars. So we tell people, here is a course that you can go through, and then I don't know, every 3 months or every 6 months there will be all you can ask webinar with where you can come and ask questions, and if OASPA is interested, we as Foster would very much like to collaborate, and we have this platform for online courses. Project will run until May next year, so if we do this quickly, we can still do something useful. And so that's like an easy part, early career researchers, because I have a good understanding of what they might need. For the staff at open access publishing organizations, I have a feeling that you keep hiring people, and sometimes you hire like really sometimes you hire people who might not be following all the latest developments in open science, because it's simply not possible to follow all the latest developments because there is so much going on. So maybe we could also have something like, I don't know, a crash course on open science for the staff that joins open access publishing organization and might not be so much aware of what FAIR data stands for, what is open data, what is open science. And for that, I think we can also have, I don't know, maybe it's 1 hour, 2 hours course, and then some support webinars, or it could be like a real e-learning course, but then, I don't know, it would require more time, and probably you don't want your staff to be spending time on going through online courses. Is there any interest in co-developing these training courses?
going back to your slide about Croatia and talking about how, I think it was a researcher saying that they would like to publish in their local journals, but there's not high quality journals that are local, or something, to paraphrase. So I guess my question is, how can we support strengthening the journals in developing countries or countries in the global south, or however you want to call it, without kind of imposing our northern models on them? Because I think that's a challenge. We want to ensure in a system that's global and equitable that there are local journals in those countries. But every time we get into a discussion about it, we end up imposing our solutions in those countries. So I wonder if you have any suggestions for that, or others.
Well, I don't know. I'm not so scared to propose our solution as long as we make sure that we bring different perspectives to the table, because we're not suggesting something new. We're just sharing experiences of others that already went through this process. And that example from Polish Academy of Sciences that I showed, they had brainstorming exercise. They ended up with this open business model. They ended up with some recommendations, and these are the recommendations that others can take or not take. It's not imposing anything on them. What's really imposing is the way researchers are evaluated, because, like Susan said yesterday, researchers in the global south are evaluated on the same basis as researchers in the global north, which is usually where they publish, and where they publish is usually high impact factor journal, which might not even have any relevance to the work that university or researchers are doing, but it's still high impact factor journal. So I think if we change that, if we switch from impact factors to impact as such, and if universities start evaluating researchers based on the impact their works make, and not the journal where they publish, that will change. And of course, you know that there are a lot of excellent open access publishing initiatives in Latin America, and their Latin American experiences are very relevant to researchers in Africa, and I don't think it would be called imposing our business models if we bring experiences like this to the table as well. And I think it's wrong if we come and say, this is what you should be doing, but if we just create a platform for collaboration and discussion, I don't think there is a danger of bringing northern perspective to the global south.
Can I just follow up? So, but what would you suggest, though, in terms of how we can strengthen those local initiatives in the global south to help improve, if there is an issue of quality, how can we help improve the quality?
If they have access to current best practices, like if they know how editorial policies should look like, how open access policies should be drafted, how copyright policies should be drafted to make sure that authors really retain copyright, and if they use Creative Commons licenses, etc. That's already one way, making it easy for them to discover latest good practices with policies, and then having support available to upgrade their platforms if they use OGS, to make sure that they could be upgraded to the latest version of OGS, which is much better than the previous version, or show them other open access publishing platforms they could be using. And if they don't have support in-house, then talk to research and education networks that might have such support in place, like it's a case in Croatia, while librarians don't really worry about the platform. ICT people are involved in this platform management.
If I may step in here, because it's an important issue you raise here, how to improve the quality of the local journals. One of the issues is that in some countries, the government has imposed mechanisms which will reward the institutions or the researchers if they publish in good quality journals. And this has generated that virtually every university department at a university in the country should have their own journal, which is a very local journal, because often the editorial board is comprised by the colleagues next door, and guess who is doing the peer review? It's the same people, right? So by working with the best practice and principles of transparency and some minimum standards, I think we can improve the journals, and I don't think this is imposing sort of North things. It's sort of minimum requirements, and I guess Iryna know because she works as a volunteer for DOAJ, and these are the issues that we are dealing with all the time, trying to implement those the best practice to make the editorial boards, for instance, more stronger and more diverse and so forth. So yeah, it's an important issue.
Is that possibly a role for? Could that be a role for OASPA then? A specific activity focusing on strengthening journals, open access journals in the global south or something like that? I mean, perhaps that's not the way it should be articulated.
That would be the best one to ask, because we are really into that business with a lot of people, right? And, on that part, DOAJ has much more work for us. So that's part of the reason why OASPA has asked us to help with the negotiations. But it is really hard work. It's a huge educational effort, actually, which is going on a day-to-day basis.
But we also know that many DOAJ volunteer editors are librarians, and I think librarians already have almost all the knowledge they need to share with journal editors and publishers in small institutions and small countries. So I really see this as an opportunity for collaborating between librarian publishers, OASPA, and I don't know, maybe other organizations. But I think what those publishers need is not only the principles, but also some templates they could adopt to their situations, because going from the principles to your own policies or operations might still be a long way to go, and it would be good if there is also, I don't know, corpus of this kind of templates and good practices examples available.
Hi. Thank you for raising the potential unintended consequences of Plan S, particularly as concerns the stratification of publishing patterns in different parts of the world, and hopefully we'll talk more about that later. But I had a question, which was one subject that wasn't really touched on in your talk was the repository and the repository world, which is obviously you talked about public collaborative infrastructure. Did you talk about repositories? Did I miss it? And I was just wondering, because it seems to me that one of the problems is this green-gold distinction. And really, if as Jean-Claude said yesterday, what we want to move towards is a model where there aren't these fixed outputs, but rather records of different versions, then the integration of the repository landscape into the publishing landscape seems one way to go for public collaborative infrastructure. I wanted to know your views.
Thanks, Tony. I had this example of Kurchak, and until now I don't really know whether it's a publishing platform or whether it's a repository, because it's a place where publishers host their journals. There is OGS based on top of it, which publishers use to actually manage and publish their journals. So I don't know, is it a repository? I guess it is a repository, but at the same time it's also a publishing platform. And I think that's an excellent example for small publishing initiatives that don't want to invest into their own publishing platforms or staff to manage those publishing platforms. And to me, that's an idea of open access publishing. I'm not saying that's the only way, but that's one of the ways which seem to be working well in the region.
Yeah, thanks, Iryna, for that. It's very interesting also as an Austrian to see this example of Croatia. But having worked on open access for 8 years, your slide where your Croatian researcher is saying, well, actually now it's so expensive, is not the first time I hear this. And for me, I always have the feeling that this is now a cost that for the first time a researcher actually sees the cost of publishing. Because normally a subscription goes through the library. And if you're a researcher, you actually have no clue how much your library pays for the subscription. So what I think is probably impossible in costs is having both systems, right? That's why we are talking about the transition to open access. Because if you have to pay subscriptions and you have to pay APCs, well, that's a lot of money, and then there's the whole offsetting. But there was this idea that was with the OA 2020 initiative from Max Planck, that one could switch the library budget, what you spend now on subscriptions, on paying APCs. That seems to be a little bit stuck, what I've heard, but I was wondering if this was ever something that was discussed, because of course there's the argument that there is quite a sufficient amount of money in the system, it's just that it's spent at the moment on subscriptions, and if you free this up, you can pay the APCs from that. Do you have a view on that?
Thanks, Daniel. With OA 2020 plan, it's not only about flipping and supporting APCs or offsetting, it's also supporting local publishing initiatives if that's the way a consortium decides to spend their money, which is, I think, a good addition to OA 2020 plan that we shouldn't forget about. As to the argument that there are enough money in the system, we did this exercise for a couple of Eastern European countries, because EIFL also has licensing program, and my colleagues negotiate licenses to commercial e-resources. And because we negotiate on behalf of 40 countries, we get really big discounts from publishers, and amount of money that certain Eastern European country pays for subscriptions, unfortunately, is not enough to pay for open access publishing, because it would be more expensive. Of course, if there are no discounts, if countries pay list prices offered by commercial subscription-based publishers, then there is enough money. Unfortunately, in many countries, it's not enough. And I'm not that pessimistic about OA 2020 initiatives. There are a lot of good developments going on recently, and I think we'll be hearing more in December when Berlin Open Access Conference will take place. But we do need to bring the cost down, because unfortunately, it's not enough yet.
Yeah, Iryna, thank you very much for this very interesting talk and for all the important work that you're doing in Eastern and Southern Europe and the Global South. So from my own experience, in order to design equitable foundations and to be inclusive, you have to be participatory, and we're trying to do that in open knowledge maps as well, and we're definitely richer for it. So I was wondering if you agree with this perspective, and if yes, where do you think, how can we bring more people to the table, and which are the areas where we are missing this participation at the moment?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I agree. And well, we're missing researchers, obviously, and it was mentioned that we need more outreach and engagement to different research communities, because it shouldn't be publishers-driven initiative, it should be library-driven initiative, it should be scholarly communities-driven initiative, and it would be good to engage with them better. And then, like I said, because there are not enough money in the system, you have to find some in-kind contributions, and I think this type of in-kind contributions could come from libraries who could be training and supporting new publishing initiatives which require support and can't get it from anybody else. Infrastructures like those NRANs, National Research and Education Initiatives, then I don't know how European Open Science Cloud will be shaped. Maybe there will be some opportunities there as well. We'll see in November when it's launched. And then, yeah, I don't know, whom else? Maybe you could suggest some other stakeholders that we're missing.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes not diverse enough in terms of stakeholder groups, as you mentioned, but then also not diverse enough in the backgrounds of the people that we bring to the table. And for me, it would be important to also increase that participation in all the events and meetings and the groups that we have.
And I think it was mentioned yesterday that if you really want to have diverse representation, you go and proactively seek that. You can't just sit and expect that this diversity will come. But I guess all of us have different ideas and requirements about diversity, and we need different types of diversity. So that's like organizational thinking exercise that should happen. And then they should proactively reach out to those people who are underrepresented. Thank you.
Yeah.